And we are live with Detachment 075. Welcome to our 7th episode of the Detachment Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Cadet Third Class Jerian Gihama. As always, I'm joined by members of the PA team, Cadet Major Rojas and Cadet Third Class Kinghorn. In addition to us, we also have a guest co-host on the show, Cadet Third Class Black. Nice to have you on, man. And we have a very special guest for y'all. He is an MQ-9 pilot, also nicknamed the Reaper. So without further ado, I would like to welcome First Lieutenant Corbin White. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, guys. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. How about yourself?
Just hanging in there. Busy day. We're about to do a bunch of training, so I appreciate you guys accommodating doing this a little bit earlier than what you probably hoped. So appreciate that.
Pleasure having you on. So for all the listeners out there, can you give a brief introduction about yourself and what you do in the Air Force?
Yeah. So I was a ROTC graduate. Went to SDSU. That's why I follow you guys on the page. So able to keep up on all you guys' other podcasts and cool things you do. Watch you all continue through the program, which is really sick. Did ROTC first year. I entered the detachment was 2011. Finally graduated in 2018 with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. After that, it was a little bit of waiting around in San Diego, just doing an odd job until it was time to actually PCS to my first station. After San Diego, I went right to Randolph Air Force Base, where they immediately put me in a casual job for some time. After that, you start doing training. You go to IFT, which is DOS in Pueblo. You return from that. Then you begin your next phases of training, which is RIQ and RFC back at Randolph Air Force Base. Once you're done with that, you ITDY to Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, finish up the training pipeline there, and then head out to my base that I was assigned while I was in Randolph. So right now I'm actually in Whiteman Air Force Base, trying to finish up MQT, but waiting for the squadron to currently finish a reconstitution, which I can talk about more later if anyone's interested.
Definitely. Well, thank you for the introduction, sir. And I know you alluded to it. I know you dropped some hints in there about San Diego, but I don't think a lot of the cadets picked up that you were actually a cadet in our detachment 075.
Yep. I was back in the detachment in 2011 was my first year. If anybody's a nerd in knowing who all the commanders are at the detachment, I was in when Colonel Wojciak was commander, all the way up through. Let me see, who was it? Colonel Tucker,
Yes,
I believe it was. Yep, he was the last commander while I was still in the detachment. So I was definitely in for quite some time. And depending on if you're interested or not, I can talk about what went on during those multiple years. But basically, I really wanted to be a pilot. And until someone said, no, you can't, I just, kicked down every single door that was in my way to make sure I got that job.
Awesome. Yeah. And we're definitely gonna talk about your time in the detachment a little bit later in the podcast. But for now, I'd just like to say good evening, sir. And I wanted to ask you about how it all started. Where did the journey to becoming a pilot start for you? Did you always have an affinity for flying, or were you like the thousands of cadets out there with remote control models? Where did it really start for you?
So initially, everything started for me probably in 2008. I kind of had an idea I want to try out military. Everyone around me was usually either Marines or Army, and all of them, the resounding thing was go Air Force. If I could go back and I could change anything, it would be the military branch that I was in. They were all, Air Force will just treat you better 100%. And I can vouch that that's definitely been the case, no doubt. So back in 2008, I started Civil Air Patrol. There might be a couple of cadets at the detachment that used to be cadets in that program. I started in that, did their color guard to see if I even wanted to wear the uniform, because that can be an immediate deterrent right there. I don't want to wake up every morning, put on a set of blues, put on a flight suit, put on a uniform. For me, I saw it as a plus side because then I don't have to pick what I need to wear every time I go into work. So I saw it as something, really easy. After I noticed that it wasn't as bad as some people make it out to be, I had a second lieutenant who was actually working at the detachment at that time come and do a talk to us at Civil Air Patrol on Camp Pendleton. I was like, oh, this guy is awesome. He really sold his story. He sold the active duty lifestyle. So I decided to go sign up once I finished high school and right into college. I walked in the detachment, walked up to the front desk. I was like, I want to start. I have no idea how. And they just walked me right through it. So Civil Air Patrol kind of really solidified whether I really wanted to even do it. Prior to that, it was just being surrounded by a bunch of military, definitely in Southern California, where we have Navy, Marines, and Air Force just, all over the place.
So I know you just talked about it. There ultimately are a lot of choices. Being in Southern California, I know that you've got a bunch of various branches. For you in particular, why was the Air Force the choice for you? Why did you pick that? And then as well, why ROTC? I know it's a unique route, but can you elaborate?
So I'll start on with why Air Force. Like I said, everyone around me said, if I had to, I'd go Air Force. Yes, there are people who are just built to go Marines. They're just built to go Army. They're just built to go Navy, and so on and so forth. For me, I knew you had to be smart, and I knew that they'd take care of you. Everybody I talked to, they were like, every time we went onto an Air Force base, everything was just perfect. They had dining facilities, they had shopping. I mean, to have restaurants on the base, and they just take care of you. They actually cared as a military member. In the branches that they served in prior, they were almost looked at as a number from what I was told. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted my voice to actually matter. I wanted obviously everybody's mission matters, but in a branch that really cares about you, they take the time to put energy into what you want to do. So with that, you had a second part of the question. The train left my station.
Yeah, no, you're good. Why Reserve Officer Training Corps?
So the reason why I went ROTC is I wanted a fail-safe. I wanted to be in the military so bad that if someone said no, it better be a stern no. There better be no other way for me to get in. With going ROTC, if I got kicked out of ROTC or I just couldn't do it while in college, I had a backup of doing OTS after college. So it was kind of like a backup, a fail-safe. If I'm in the middle of academics and I just go, I can't do it, this is way too much work with ROTC and balancing academics and social life, I can't. Drop out, finish college, finish working, save up a little money, turn around, do OTS. All right, I'm good to go. Kind of a second chance. So that was the reason why for me, because I actually didn't get accepted the first time my package got submitted. So I looked at it as like, wow, okay, thank goodness I went this way. Who knows what would happen?
So I know you say, sir, you took a little bit more time to graduate ROTC. Why was that, sir?
So when I first started ROTC in 2011, I started for 1 year, and I actually didn't have a car to get to San Diego. I lived up in Fallbrook, so just between Vista and Temecula, for those of you who don't know where Fallbrook is. And that's a good 45-minute drive. I'm sure at least one or two cadets are doing that commute right now in the detachment. Commute sucks. And the only way I could get to the detachment was to bum a ride off of a family member or someone else who was heading to San Diego at 4 o'clock in the morning. After doing that for a year, I couldn't keep asking family members to give me a ride. So I had to take a year off. I worked nonstop, got enough money to buy a car, started back up the year after. That year that I came back was a year that the Air Force was actually not accepting a lot of applicants. So my package got denied, and it was really a downer. I was going to San Diego Christian at the time, and when I got the news, hey, you didn't make it, I came into the office. He said, I'm sorry, we just can't. I walked out of the detachment. I saw other students as well that didn't get accepted. And I thought, wow, dang, maybe this just wasn't meant to be. So after that, I walked away. I continued to do school for another semester. In that semester, my wife, when she was my girlfriend at the time, actually said, hey, at the detachment, you didn't get accepted, but they give you one more shot if your package gets denied. So with that, I went, oh, you know what? My door wasn't fully closed. I'm going to try this again. Walked back in the detachment. I said, hey, I got one more shot. Your guys' rules, I'm allowed to try again. So they allowed me to enter the program, and I continued on halfway through the year. So I was mid-semester. Let me think. First semester was already done. So I came back in roughly November, December, applied, and started the next year midway through. So my package couldn't be submitted. So I had to sit around at the detachment for a semester, still doing everything else that the normal cadet does. I still had to participate in PT, still had to participate in lead lab and everything. And then once that semester finished, summer passed and the year started up again, I then was able to keep doing ROTC and build a package that they were able to submit. So kind of that beginning period, that first 2 years is where a lot of the bulk of time was spent. And in that, there was a lot of changing degrees, changing colleges in order to make it work, just to exhaust all avenues.
I just want to say good on you. Just from hearing that, like the amount of heart and dedication you had to just keep pursuing is insane. And I'm pretty sure a lot of cadets can take away from that. And just having that, just because like even the analogy you use, the door not being fully shut, don't allow that to limit you, and in fact, use that as fuel to the fire and just knock that door through. Because I mean, look where you're at now, kudos.
Yep.
So
yeah.
amazing.
And I want to say that really helped in the long run. And we'll be talking about it more. But as I went through the training pipeline, that work ethic or that determination to continue within the program paid dividends later on in the pipeline because it's not an easy pipeline. Yes, it's much shorter than the manned pilot pipeline, but there's still the same amount of expectation to pass your tests, pass your flights. And if I didn't have that same determination that I had while I was in ROTC, I would have just given up, and I probably wouldn't have gotten to Whiteman here to be actual base where I've got. So I'm just glad I did.
Now, earlier in the intro, you mentioned there was some stuff going on in the detachment when you were a cadet. So I was wondering if you could speak on your unique experience as a cadet in the detachment and what kind of important lessons you learned.
So during that time, kind of building up to that, a lot of people in the detachment put emphasis on you got to do honor guard or you got to do one of these extra programs. I didn't have time for that. Between the 45-minute commute to and from San Diego State and working as well, there's just no time to do that extracurricular activity within the detachment, as I would call it. And a lot of people said that would really boost your chances. And seeing as it may, I didn't have that, upper leg, as some people call it. So that was very much so a downer as I'm going through the program, seeing everybody else who lived much closer to the university being able to do these extracurricular programs, still go to the detachment every Tuesday and Thursday and get their academics. And I couldn't participate in that. So I felt kind of ostracized and kind of down of, I'm probably not going to make it. When I got that word, hey, you didn't make it, I was really torn. But when I walked out of that detachment and I walked out to that first sidewalk, I saw several other people there as well that didn't make it. People that were much smarter than I was with totally different degrees. And I look and I go, wow, they didn't make it and I didn't make it. Okay. That's when it really clicked that being in one of these programs, yeah, it may help, but it's not the be all end all. If you're driven, if you're determined, if you actually try at your academics, at your lead labs and exhaust all your resources, you'll make it 100%. And a lot of that, how should I say, a lot of the reason why people didn't make it that year was simply because the Air Force said, yeah, there's a lot of you, and especially coming from a detachment that has 250 people, it makes it very difficult to get in. Air Force said, we can't take that many of you, and the detachment had to say, all right, we're gonna have to start cutting. So they did, but because ROTC gives you a second chance, I took it, the year after. Glad I did too.
All right. Yeah, I definitely feel that. Yeah, I can understand. So you mentioned that, you're able to graduate, and back, when we were transitioning back to the school topic, when did you know you wanted to choose rated? And could you talk a little bit about how your degree possibly helped you in your AFSC choice?
Yeah, so one misconception is, and hopefully it's been clarified since I was there, a big misconception is you need to have a technical degree if you want to go pilot. I graduated with criminal justice. I know another pilot, he's manned, he was criminal justice as well. It definitely helps your chances, but again, it's not the be all end all. If you keep trying, you can make it work. Changing over to criminal justice was a big help. I actually originally started off, my package originally had civil engineering. And because of all those delays in school, because of not getting accepted the first time, I actually had to make some adjustments, make some tweaks, and I had to go from civil engineering over to criminal justice to both boost my GPA and get done in the time frame to graduate on time. So a lot of tweaking went into that there. On top of it, to answer your question about the particular AFSC, when I first started, I wanted to be a mobility pilot. Basically, the bigger the aircraft, the more I wanted to fly it. And I was like, oh my gosh, those things are not supposed to stay in the air. I want to fly that thing. To me, fighter pilot was not something that was really interesting at all. So I was kind of just stuck with, okay, I want to do heavies, I want to do mobility, something like that. As I started to do more research, I realized how long they were gone for. And with me being more of a family man, I was like, I don't know if that's going to work. I can make it work. I can probably figure it out. After I didn't get accepted the first time, I go, oh, wow, I didn't get accepted to that AFSC. What else is there? I started to do a lot of research into the RPA world and realized how much room for growth there is within this section of the Air Force. One, with being detached from the aircraft, allowing you to fly more, allowing if the aircraft crashes, you still get to survive, turn around, fly again the next day, the next week, should something happen. If I was a manned pilot and something happened to my aircraft or I didn't return home, that was it, job done. And I go, wow, for me personally and what I want and what I'm looking for in the future with family and stuff of that sort, I go, RPA seems like the way to go, especially with how much room it has for growth and aircraft that the Air Force has that the general public doesn't even know about yet, that we know, wow, I could fly one of those in the next 5-10 years.
Thank you, sir. Well, definitely later in the podcast, we have a segment planned about like what you think the future is with RPA. But going back to the school side there, do you have any recommendations for like any particular degree or programs cadets interested in this AFSC should be doing to like help them get an idea what this career field is going to be like for them?
Any academics I can do? For me, not really. I did not see any along the way that would have maybe boosted my knowledge of this AFSC or about the aircraft in particular. But it also depends on what kind of learner you are. If you're very much a hands-on learner and, hey, I really want to go be in a club that works with drones or robotics or something of that sort, by all means, go for it. Every person is different, so I'm not going to say there's a one cookie cutter answer to, hey, this is how I did it, this is the only way it can be done. Not at all. I would say as long as you find a way to get it done, you can make it work. if you have the brains and the smarts to go for a technical degree, be it civil engineering, be it a language, go for it by all means. For me, I couldn't do that because of stuff that happened in classes, and because I had to change to make the timeline work and to boost my GPA. Would I say that it hurt me in any way? Possibly. I probably could have gotten accepted a little sooner by changing or by keeping a civil engineering degree. But looking at it, the reason why I went criminal justice is to also possibly line myself up for a job after I'm done with the Air Force. Again, going back to thinking, all right, what's my backup plan? My first backup plan when I was in the detachment was, I'm going to do ROTC if I need to. I got a way to get back in the Air Force after ROTC if that doesn't work. For Air Force, if for some reason I absolutely love this or I absolutely hate it, I can stay in, I can get out. I've got a job lined up with criminal justice, flying for Border Patrol, DOD, or some other 3-letter agency. Secures me a job because it allows you to put on your resume that you have criminal justice and that you also have connections along the way with people that were in that sort of career field. Even Border Patrol is actually one of the avenues that I'm, kind of feeling out for once I'm done here in this career field to possibly do as a job outside of the Air Force. So just another way to line it up in that aspect. But again, to answer the question, there's not really anything specific that I'd say to people of, hey, go do this class, go do that class. Keep your GPA up, A, because you need to, B, because if you keep working for that GPA, that's going to help you in the training pipeline with academics, because whether you go manned or unmanned, there is a lot of reading and a lot of documents that you guys are going to see. So having good study habits, period, is going to be a game changer.
So we know that you didn't really have the opportunity to do JBB or Honor Guard, but so was Aztec Aviation Organization around when you were there? I mean, so I'm just thinking now that I guess it helps sort of direct cadets towards aviation, but I don't know if really, I mean, in your case, was it there? Did it help you? Were you in it?
I'm trying to remember if it was there. There was a program, and that may have been it. I can't recall the name of it at all, but it was over at, I believe, Gillespie Airfield, where you would go and you'd learn the fundamentals of flying and stuff of that sort. Again, the reason why I couldn't do some of the programs was simply because of that commute, because of the amount of academics I had to do. Getting my senior year, I was sitting there with 21, 22 units on top of ROTC and stuff like that. So yeah, you guys are in college still right now. You just think of the amount of units and you're going, oh my God, no, please. So that's more, yeah, that's definitely more why I couldn't keep doing it. But doing reading on my own, I think at least got me familiar with it. So when I started the training pipeline, it wasn't completely foreign to me. So you can almost teach yourself the bare fundamentals when you get in so that you have a rough idea, because they are going to teach you from the ground up when you start this pipeline. There's no doubt about it. I had people in my training class that I had to explain to one student the difference between fuel and oil. It sounds funny, but not everybody knows. And you go, oh, wow, I did some of my research, I did some of my studying beforehand. And yes, I knew a lot of the fundamentals going into this, but the fact that they were able to teach someone who, as simple as it seems, doesn't know the difference between, fuel and oil, you go, oh, wow, they can take someone from that ground level and build them all the way up to be a pilot. If you can't do a program like that, don't even worry about it. But it might, let you get your feet wet and say, hey, do I even like flying? And we'll talk about it in a little bit, I'm sure. But when I went to DOS, when I went to IFT, I hated flying. It was not something for me. I did not like being in the aircraft because it's just not something that I wanted to do. Being apart from the aircraft and flying at the same time, I'm, absolutely in love with it. So, and everybody's different.
Yes, sir. And Now we transition to your MQ9 seat. So you commission, went to Midway, had the ceremony, and now you go to training. We know like main pilots go to IFT and UPT, but what is the difference with the RPA pilots?
So for the RPA pilots, you still go to IFT, initial flight training. Then you go to, these two are kind of joined at the hip, but you go to RFC and RIQ, actually in the other way around, RIQ and RFC. They're both taking place at Randolph. After that, you go to IQT at Holloman, and then you, at your base you're stationed at, you do MQT. So the much shorter pipeline, if you take the manned pipeline and basically cut it in half, that's the amount of time you have to work with to make someone go from knowing nothing to you're dropping bombs somewhere overseas within 2 years. And so the only reason I am not fully doing, bombs on target right now is simply because I had a kid and they're doing a reconstitution right now. But within 2 years of graduating, you're mission ready in the seat, alone and unafraid. And you can tell me how in depth you want me to go with each of those trainings, or is that later?
No, that's for now, sir. So
Okay.
after IFT, what is the process to become an RPA pilot?
So all of these all these trainings along the way are kind of ways to weed you out, kind of separate the strong from the weak, the determined from the undetermined. While I went to IFT, there was several people, they were not even a week into the program and going, nope, I'm done, just calling it quits. Now, mind you, at IFT, you're flying a tiny little DA-20, nothing at all like the MQ-9 that you'll be flying. You're flying in the cockpit. MQ-9, you're not even flying in the same area as the aircraft. You're on the ground the entire time, completely different. So a very tough way to judge your AFSC at IFT. It's more of just a way to break you. Can you keep up with your studies? Can you put in the determination to make a lineup card to prepare for your flight and be fearless in an aircraft all by yourself? So a lot of the building blocks is what goes into IFT, goes into both of your trainings at Randolph. Randolph is a beast in and of itself. You're basically there for roughly 6 months flying nonstop. The difference between the MQ-9 pipeline and manned pilot pipeline is manned pilot, they're actually going out and flying the T6. After a manned pilot goes out and finish IFT, they're going and they're flying the T6 in the cockpit, going out into actual airspace and doing that. When you go to Holloman and it's your turn to fly the T6, you're flying in a several $100,000 simulator every single day, nonstop, academics in between, studying on your own time. While I was there during those 3-4 months, it was a grind to say the least. So studying hard in college, working to get those grades is definitely what's going to prepare you for getting to Holloman, or getting to Randolph, sorry.
Okay, and last question on training. So we know you do a lot of simulators, but when do you have the opportunity to fly an MQ-1 or MQ-9, or fly we'll say a real drone?
So the first time you actually get to do anything drone related is when you get to Holloman in New Mexico. You're going to get there, you're going to have academics for a good 2 weeks, and then you're flying in a simulator. That's the first time it's really kicking in that you're actually going to be flying an MQ-9, because while you're at Randolph, you're going to be doing RFC for a few weeks, and they have a simulator that's similar to what the MQ-9 is, but it's so roughly done. It's like flying a simulator at home. It just doesn't really cut it. When you get to Holloman, you're there for, call it 4 weeks, and you're flying the bird on your own. Not on your own, sorry. You're flying with instructors, but you're actually hands-on controls flying it around New Mexico, a multi-million-dollar aircraft, as a 23, 24, 25-year-old going, oh my gosh, my entire career is in my hands right now, as you're practicing dropping bombs on target, as you're practicing loitering, as you're doing all these different maneuvers that you do as an MQ-9 pilot. So several weeks into Holloman, about a year and a half-ish into your training is when you actually get to start flying the MQ-9, which is a lot sooner than even some manned pilots even get the opportunity to do.
So I noticed that you touched on the simulator theme, and obviously that's a big aspect of being an RPA pilot. Did you ever play simulators growing up? Like, I mean, flight simulators, Microsoft Flight Simulator X, for example. Did you play those growing up? And are those realistic?
So I played some. The biggest thing, whether you have one that can do an MQ-9 or not, the biggest thing is just having hand-eye coordination. I still play a lot of video games, simulators, just having that spatial orientation that you can look at a screen that just tells you where you're going without seeing the aircraft. Because, while you're flying the MQ-9, you can't look over and look out the window and see what you're flying above, see what's behind you, see what's above you. You have none of that. While you're going into a turn, you don't have that seat of your pants feel. It's in your butt saying, hey, I'm turning left, I'm turning right, I'm slipping, I'm doing this, that, and the other thing. You have none of that. So playing video games where you can't feel the video game or simulator, where you can't feel any of that, but you can look at an instrument going, oh, when I turn left, I see this dial do this. When I speed up, I see this gauge change this way without feeling anything. Even if you're not doing anything MQ-9, none of the simulators MQ-9, even a little Cessna, a little DA-20, whatever, just to look at gauges, because they're going to be the same in the aircraft. The way that they're displayed is what's going to change. That's going to be it. So, yeah.
I can imagine in a career field like this that there are some things that are great and some things that are not so great. So could you, enlighten us and tell us a little bit about the pros and cons of being an RPA pilot?
Yeah. So I'll go with the cons first. The cons, we don't have the best of bases. There's some career fields where, oh my gosh, I was in training with a Marine where he's stationed in Hawaii right now. And I was like, oh, I really hate you right now, man. You're a bro, but I hate you. We don't have the best bases. It's an aircraft where you can fly anywhere in the world from anywhere in the world. And when they made these bases, they took that very literal. Again, too, though, they did that for the safety and security of the United States and the United States Air Force. In places that are somewhat isolated, not a lot of people are going to be out there. Like I said, I'm here right now in Whiteman in Missouri. Buddies out at Creech doing their training right there. And obviously it's one of the better places, but I gotta say, some people look at it as a negative, but I'm loving it out here. It's all what you make of it. Bases can be terrible, but if you're just having a positive attitude, it's not as bad. And again, you're gonna get a base, you're gonna change within a few years anyway, so don't even sweat that. Another negative that I would say is, because this is an aircraft, we can fly 24/7. You are on call 24/7. It's a positive that you won't deploy and you get to go home to your family at the end of your shift. But at the end of it, you're going to sleep at 2:00 in the afternoon, waking up later in the day, having that just then start your shift. And then within 2-3 weeks, all depending on what base you go to, you could completely have to shift your sleeping cycle to a totally different time. Your circadian rhythm is just thrown off every couple of weeks. You'll have swing shifts, mid shifts, and day shifts, and you'll cycle between all three of those every few weeks. So it can be very straining. So making sure to take time off and having a commander that cares is a big help. For the positives, though, I kind of already mentioned one. I get to go home at the end of the day. Yes, there's opportunities to deploy, but I'm not going to be gone for, 3 months to 8 months away from my family, missing kids' birthdays, missing multiple holidays at once. Because it's the Air Force, you have the chance that you're always going to miss a holiday. So put that in the back of your mind. Don't even let that worry you. At every squadron, they will work with you. Hey, do you want Christmas off? Do you want Thanksgiving off? You're going to have to work one, but let me work with you and see, how we can help you. So that's definitely a positive. The other positive that I kind of mentioned before is because this is a career field that is going to explode and already is, the amount of job opportunities and the amount of ways that I can sit there and raise my hand and go, hey, pick me, I'll try that, I'll do that, let me try it, are just enormous. Like I kind of touched on, it's what you make of it and what you decide that you want to do. How much effort do you want to put into this along the way? You're going to get out what you put in.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So since you're a first LT and an RPA pilot, do you have any experiences where you have to bring in your leadership into that career field?
Yeah, actually, this is, everybody's story is different, but as soon as you pin on that rank, you are assuming leadership right away. I got to Randolph. I wasn't hardly there a week, and they put me in a job there on the base. And I'll talk about later how much it's changed from this, but they put me at a job on the base to help with Air Force recruiting. So they put 6 of us lieutenants in an office and said, hey, we need to make recruiting better. I have not done a single U.S. Air Force job, and you're asking me how to recruit people. You just got me. I don't even know how. So right away, they put leadership responsibilities on you. Here's the thing. You put on the rank of an officer, but they also know you've never been an officer before. You've never been a leader. So there are, I don't want to say a scapegoat, but as a second lieutenant, there's opportunities to do leadership, but they know that you're going to fail and you're going to mess up. So there's fail safes for when you mess up to kind of protect you from immediately getting kicked out of the Air Force if you just did some leadership thing incorrectly. If you go and mess up and decide to, drink and then drive, okay, that's totally different. Don't even try. But if you mess up as a leader, they know this is part of the training. This is part of what's going to happen. We can work through this. So immediately right out of the gate is when you're going to start doing leadership stuff. And from that, it's just you're going to continue through some of the trainings. You're not going to have as many opportunities because you're just there with a bunch of lieutenants and you're all in the exact same boat together, having no idea what's going on, trying to figure it out. But once you get to Holloman, you're immediately assigned to an enlisted person as your sensor operator, and you guys are tight-knit throughout the entire program. You do every flight together. You fail every flight together. Whether he or she fails or whether you fail, you both fail together as a team. So right there, I think, is when the leadership really grows, because you have to take an airman under your wing and help make sure they get through the program so that they can help make sure you get through the program.
Oh, understood, sir. So can you go a little bit in detail? What is your sensor operator duties?
Yeah. So as everybody knows, the aircraft is detached from the cockpit. The cockpit will be located in point A. The aircraft will be located in, point B. You have to have someone flying the plane, obviously, but since we're not in the aircraft and we don't have windows to be able to look outside, your sensor operator, the person in your right-hand seat, is basically your eyes in this entire scenario. Through every mission you're going to do, every training, they are your eyes on the ground. There's a payload underneath the aircraft. You've probably seen in tons of pictures. If you Google MQ-9, you see that ball. It's just a giant camera. And that thing just swivels around all the way, and they can zoom in, look at your target on the ground, zoom out, look at, hey, here's where we're going. And since you have a handful of aircraft, and as the pilot in charge, that is your aircraft. Any mistake that happens is your fault. You have a lot going on, and you don't have time to then operate a sensor ball at the same time while flying, making sure you stay within borders, that you don't cut through boundaries, and that you don't, accidentally go where you're not supposed to. You have your sensor operator back you up with everything you're doing and making sure that they have eyes on the target. They're also the ones that guide in the munitions that you're asked to deliver. So when you have a hellfire and someone in the chain of command says, we need this target destroyed, you as the pilot, you equip it, you get the aircraft there, you get all set up to be able to make an attack run, and your sensor has to make sure that he or she is looking at the target, their field of view is correct, so that you can see all the target you need to without being too far zoomed out or too far zoomed in. And when you release that weapon, they're the ones guiding it in the entire time. So some officers, and I'm not saying anyone in the detachment, but some officers think, oh, you're enlisted, your job is meaningless. Without that enlisted person in that seat, your mission would be a complete failure. You don't have someone to back you up when an emergency happens. You don't have someone to guide in your munitions. You're absolutely useless if you don't have your sensor operator right there next to you.
Okay, sir. So can we go more in detail about the training the sensor operator goes through?
So surprisingly, you actually don't even see any of the sensor operators until you are just about finished at Randolph. You'll go through IFT in Pueblo. You'll just see your pilots. You'll see a couple other people there as well. You'll get to RIQ. It'll be just all pilots. You'll sometimes see the sensors just walking around the same building because they're out doing their own thing. They're learning about the payload. They're learning about everything that their job requires of them. So you'll be seeing nothing because they have to learn what they do. You're learning what you do and what's required of each of you. In RFC, back in the vault that we call it, there are 2 or 3 times as you're flying, the sensor operators actually get brought into your sorties, and they'll actually get to start working the camera while you're doing the aircraft. So that is the first time that you actually get to work with them. The rest of their training, I actually have very little insight onto what they do, but they're just learning about the stuff on the aircraft and how to do their job and what's required of them. When you get to Holloman, that's when everything starts overlapping. You start as a pilot, actually fly the aircraft, and having to work with the sensor to build up a plan for that day's sortie to make sure that all the objectives get accomplished. And so working with your sensor, their training there is to listen to their pilot, give insight as applicable, respectfully along the way, learn about weather, learn about how this camera operates and the pros and cons of it, things that can happen in different times of the day, different weather situations, so that they can help you as a pilot fly your aircraft better and get the mission done in a more expeditious way. So they're trained this whole time to help you out as a pilot. And any of you guys listening to this podcast, by the time you start flying, actually by the time you're about to finish up Randolph, you'll be noticing that a lot of these sensors just finished high school as you're wrapping up training. So they are very young, very impressionable, and they look up to you as a lieutenant, as an officer, a lot.
Thank you, sir. So this question I'm about to ask is probably going to answer a lot of questions that cadets have about RPA. Is that as the pilot, are you the one pulling the trigger in a way? Because I know you mentioned that the sensor operator is the person guiding the payload. Are they the ones that pull the trigger as well?
Yeah. So to bring everything in and to think about big picture, as officers, we're going to school, we're pinning on second lieutenant, we're getting much higher pay than the enlisted. So we've been given a lot of good things, a lot of really amazing things. The Air Force, blesses you as an officer with all these, amazing perks. With that comes a lot of responsibility. We wear those wings on our chest to show, hey, this is what we've earned. This is what I've done to get here. This is all the schooling. This is all the training. This is all the blood, sweat, and tears I've put into this dream that I'm making come true. And then they give you as a first lieutenant, second lieutenant, all depending, as a captain, they give you this aircraft. You are now the officer. You're now the commander or the pilot in command. It is then your responsibility to know when and when not to squeeze that trigger. It's your job to make sure the aircraft is safe. It's your job to make sure the bomb gets on target. So as the pilot, yes, you're the one who squeezes the trigger. The sensor's job is to make sure that when you squeeze the trigger, that bomb gets on target. That's why it's so important to make sure when you go through training that you learn how to communicate with your enlisted sensor, that you know how to read all the information about your aircraft, and you know how to run checklists correctly. Because if you're lazy and you decide not to skip steps, when that sensor is doing his job and you decide to do something incorrectly, it then still falls on your shoulders. And as an officer having enlisted in your cockpit, you're responsible for his or her actions as well. So even though you're the one squeezing the trigger, it's an amazing thing. You get to squeeze it. You don't get to feel the rumble of the hellfire ripping off your aircraft, but you go, I'm protecting someone back home. And so it's a lot of a responsibility. That's why it's putting on you as officers. That's why you got to go through ROT college, ROTC, all this other additional pilot training, because they expect so much from you.
Referring back to the pulling the trigger, I know it sounds like a crazy and daunting task, but so does something like that affect your psyche or your mental state, being able to pull that trigger and knowing what the causes and ramifications of that are?
Definitely depends. Each person's different. That's why too, I always make sure to keep an open mind, because every job is different. I could, long term, I could absolutely love this job. I could absolutely hate this job. It could take an absolute toll on me. It could not faze me whatsoever. Each person's different, and you don't know how that is or how you will react until you actually get involved in it. Some people from the get-go, they're just like, no, I could never take another person's life, no matter what, whether I'm doing it with a firearm, whether I'm doing it with a hellfire from 3,000 miles away, doesn't matter. Okay, then you're not built for it. In training, though, that's the whole reason why they give you checklists. That's the whole reason why they send you through all these different pipelines, to prepare you for when someone on the ground, a soldier on their headset, is yelling in their mic at you going, I need help, basically asking you to do your job. And while you're sitting there in the GCS hearing him or her talk to you, and you're their guardian angel. When they hear that an MQ-9 is on station, or if they hear that an MQ-9 is not on station, they will request that one be there, because of our capabilities and our overwatch and our ability to protect. That's where it begins to make it all worth it. When you go to squeeze that trigger, and right before you squeeze, you realize, I'm getting someone home safe. If that means killing this bad guy, I'm going to make sure they get home to their family at the end of this tour, at the end of this deployment. So it depends on what mindset you go in with. If you just go in with, I just want to ravage and kill, you're not going to last very long. I'm not going to say that no one has, but that's just definitely not the mentality you want to go with. I got a sign up here at my house, and it talks about the American soldier does not fight because he hates what's in front of him, but because he loves what's behind him. And going in with that mentality just changes the game completely. So when it's time to squeeze that trigger, you rely on your training, and you realize who you're protecting back home. Makes it 100 times easier. I'm not going to say easier, but it makes it easier to cope with. And then there's also in the Air Force a lot of ways to cope with that as well. They have a lot of resources should you realize that I'm having a hard time when I go to squeeze that trigger. So it all depends. Every person's different.
Yeah, I like that quote. Love what's behind you. And I know you spoke a little bit about the Reapers mission and what it's there to do. And I really don't, I don't think so far we haven't done justice to just how awesome, just how great this platform is. And one of the coolest aspects, to me at least, about playing this career field is the immediate application of pilots. I've heard that pilots fresh out of UPT, are out there on their first day on the job, deploying their weapon systems. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, the entire time through training, they kept telling us about records of LT is in the seat. No joke, I think it was like 7 minutes from button the seat to squeezing the trigger. No joke. So that's where it goes to rely on your training, because you never know. There's other people as well that had, I think, some 500 hours under their belt before they ever even squeezed the trigger. So it all depends. It varies depending on what base you go to. It varies on politically what's going on overseas. It's always changing. I can't talk about it too much, but I just had a conference and you realize once you get active duty of, oh, wow, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that I had no idea about. Stuff's always changing, stuff's getting set up for change. And you just gotta really be prepared. And that's why they ask for MQ9 pilots, because they realize that our training is done correctly and that they can rely on us right out of the gate, squeezing the trigger.
Thank you, sir. So going more in depth of the assignments and deployments, how often you change of assignment, or when do you deploy, sir?
Deploying is actually kind of difficult. The only way, the easiest immediate way to do a quote unquote deployment is to go launch and recovery. So through this segment, we've talked about the pilot, we've talked about the sensor operator. Those are the two people needed to fly the aircraft. One thing we hadn't touched on though is the launch and recovery aspect. Because we're flying 3,000 miles away, every movement you do, there's a several second delay in all of our commands. So we need someone over where the aircraft is, taking the bird off and landing it at the end of the day when it's done. So I can't speak too much on launch and recovery, but closest thing in the aspects of deployment or going overseas, launch and recovery, over in Italy or over in different places in Europe. That would be the first thing to look into. It's definitely a difficult job because a lot of launch and recovery get handed a lot of very broken planes. So that's a totally different beast. Deployments in and of themselves, though, are few and far between. You have to be extremely good at your job. So when you get to your normal assignment, when you get to your first base, keep your head down, don't talk too much. You're the FNG. I don't know if anybody's heard that term, but the FNG, you're the effing new guy. You know nothing, you have no say, you have no experience. So you keep your head down, you don't talk in the Merc chat unless you absolutely have to. You fly your aircraft and you get your job done. If you can keep your nose clean and you do good on your assignments, if there is anything where they need someone to deploy, then they'll come talk to you. We only have, I've been talking to several pilots here, and only one person is going to be deploying within the next week, possibly. It doesn't happen that often because, again, we're an aircraft that can fly anywhere from anywhere. So the need to deploy is pretty scarce unless they need someone overseas to do a specific task.
So I know we talked about this a little bit before the podcast started, but what are some of the misconceptions about this career field that you would like to clear up for any of the cadets out there?
The biggest one, it kind of ties hand in hand with another, but the biggest one is that you're not a real pilot. Okay, define a real pilot then. Is that someone who is actually in the aircraft? Is that someone who actually goes out and destroy targets? Because if anyone wants to say, hey, you're not a real pilot, then I turn around and say, oh, really? Any single pilot has more hours and more kills than many manned air pilots out there. I mean, they're in close competition with the A-10 because, they're just amazing aircraft in what they do and getting the job done. We execute more kills, drop more weapons than many fighters do. Not to knock fighters at all. We each have our strong points. We each have our weaknesses. We call on fighters when we need to. We call on RPAs when we need to. But you are definitely a real pilot. You may not be actually in the aircraft, but by the time you are 2 years in, you will have several thousand hours under your belt. As a manned pilot, unless you're training constantly, it's very difficult to get those hours, because as RPA, you will be flying 8 hours at a time, non-stop, maybe to get up and go to the bathroom and stuff. But not many aircraft do that day after day for 2 weeks. So you rack up your hours a lot. You drop a lot of munitions. Talking to people throughout the pipeline, they talk about, as a fighter, if you went out and you dropped all of your munitions, you came back and you were praised. They're on the flight line once you landed. They're like, "Oh my God, you dropped everything. Wow." And then they were like, as an MQ-9, you rarely come back empty. I mean, you rarely come back with anything on at all. You always come back empty, because you can sit there for hours and hours when you're needed, and then boom, we have weapons ready. Let's go. And so you're coming back. Oh, yep, we're empty. Fill it up again. Let's go. So yeah, you are definitely a real pilot. Just because you're not in the aircraft, you definitely have a job that has a major impact. The other one, we kind of already talked about it, but I guess you can say in the realm of PTSD. Can't talk too much on it because, again, everyone responds differently. To say that you would not get PTSD from taking someone else's life would be wrong. I think the hardest thing to cope with would be for me to say, I go home, go to work in the morning, I take someone's life, and then I turn around and I tuck my kids in bed at night. How do you separate it? That's what it comes down to. If you're bringing work home, you're going to have a very hard time coping with that. So there are resources out there, people to talk to. You can always talk to the chaplain. You can talk to people in your chain of command, because you're not the first person to experience it. So you can walk into your commanding officer and go, "Hey, I'm having a hard time. I'm taking someone's life, and then I'm turning around and I'm, kissing my kid in 20 minutes. I don't know how to do that." And they'll help you with working through all those issues and how to separate work and life. Because, for instance, I live literally half a mile from my squadron since I live on base. So being able to separate is definitely difficult, but it's not impossible. It all depends on how you cope with it and how much effort you put into, separating it. Those are the two biggest ones, saying we're not real pilots, and that PTSD aspect.
Thank you for clearing that up for cadets, because it's almost insultive that those are actually conceptions of RPA pilots. So we truly appreciate you clarifying that and letting everyone know that that is actually like a false stereotype. So now we'd like to move into a little section about the average day for an RPA pilot. So if you can presume and sort of mix up all of the days, what does the most average day look like? I know you've already talked about the odd hours, but yeah, the average day.
So if we just want to say the average day is just when you go into work to kind of get rid of, shift work. The average day is you are up in the morning at whatever time you're supposed to be, get in your uniform, go into the squadron. You're going to get briefed on, hey, this is what's going on over in this location. This is what we're being asked to do. This is what we're going to have. This is who we're going to have do what. The weirdest thing in day to day is you can be flying in one portion of the world, and then next day or next week flying in a completely different section. So being able to transition in that aspect is very important, because if not, you're going to start overlapping mission sets, and it can be very detrimental in the long run. But after you get briefed on, hey, here's what we're doing where, you're going to go prep with your flight, or your flight mates, I should say, which would be your sensor operator. You guys are both going to be on the same terms. You're gonna have your lineup card. You're gonna have your mission brief and say, here's what we're doing. Here's how we're doing it. And again, all this you guys are gonna learn through the training pipeline on how to brief. There's a lot of briefs, but you're gonna brief your crewmates and say, this is how we're gonna do it. Are there any questions? Are there any holes in my way of flying today? Do you see anything wrong with this? And they're gonna say, hey, yeah, you say you wanna go do this type of maneuver over in this section. What about this mountain range and this valley over here? And we're at 6 o'clock in the morning over there. Did you think about that? And you go, oh, you know what, you're right. I'm gonna shift and I'm gonna change it over here just to optimize performance while you're in your certain section of the world. After that, you're gonna go get in the cockpit in the GCS and you're gonna fly your mission. The one thing that I really like about the GCS being separate from the aircraft is you have so many resources at your fingertips. As a normal pilot, you are up in the air with whoever you can get on your headset. In here, we have everybody who we need on our headset, and we have everybody within the squadron as well. If there's someone we absolutely need because we don't know what we're supposed to do in a certain scenario, we can say, hey, go grab this person. We need their insight. And they go grab them, pull them in to the cockpit and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. This is a scenario. So it's kind of like a step back and, hey, here's what we got, which you can't do in an aircraft. You can't get someone's opinion that's not there. You have that ability. You sit there, you do your mission. Once the mission's done, you get out of your cockpit, swap off with someone or give it to LR. Go inside, you debrief. Hey, this is what we all did today. Here's John Smith messed up in this way. Let's remember that because that's going to be his call sign sometime. This is little Freddie over here. He did great in his sortie. He dropped all of his weapons, did what he needed to do. Kudos. All right, we've debriefed. There we go. End of the day. You might have other tasks depending on what rank you are. You might be a flight commander also. You might have other responsibilities within the squadron, so it kind of depends. But going in, flight prepping, doing the actual flight, going and debriefing everything, and then doing the rest of your duties is kind of the day summed up.
Thank you for giving your insight, sir.
Yeah.
So you touched on this before, but one of the advantages of being a drone pilot is that you're able to walk away from the cockpit if something goes wrong. Whereas like if you're actually manning the aircraft, something goes wrong, mission's over. Just want to like mention that also, like if something does go wrong, you're still crashing like a multi-million-dollar aircraft. So I just want to know the consequences of that happening. What's the turnaround time like for that?
Well, think about this. You have a multi-million-dollar aircraft, but in your words, how much do you think the pilot is worth? Irreplaceable.
I was going to say $10 million worth of training.
At least you have training and then you have experience, because one thing that I'll say for everybody who doesn't know, yes, we're going to be officers in the Air Force through that pipeline, but you're going to have people that went from the enlisted side and are now officers. I have a buddy here right now. He was a prior sensor operator. Now he's going pilot. Oh my gosh, not only does he have all this knowledge, he then has additional experience outside of that. So irreplaceable, it's priceless what a pilot can offer from his or her past experiences, their insight, their way of looking at things. It's irreplaceable. So yes, you're losing a multi-million-dollar aircraft, but you're walking away saying, hey, yeah, but we have a pilot. Give them another multi-million-dollar aircraft and let them go do the exact same thing. If you lost that pilot in the aircraft, you go, that's gone. Their skills that they brought to the table, we don't have anymore. You can get another MQ-9. You go, oh, they crashed it. Go grab one from this section over here, bring them over. We can keep going. Consequences can be very high. Yes, it's a multi-million-dollar aircraft, but it comes down to how did you react in a time of crisis? If you're driving along, I say driving, if you're flying along and then all of a sudden you look down and you see that, oh my God, I am out of fuel. They're going to go, did you fuel plan correctly? And you go, no, I didn't. Then they're going to go, well, that was your fault. You should have done that. But if you can turn around and say, yes, I did. Here's all the math I did. Here's the numbers that I saw along the way. I checked. I can cover, my butt in this. Then they go, let's look into it. Oh, wow, we had a fuel leak. Did you run the proper checklists? I did. I pulled up this emergency checklist and I did everything correctly, but we still had such low fuel that I had to crash it into the ground. Well, did you, dive head first? Did you do what you had to do? I did. All right, then, you know what? You're good. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into that. There's going to be investigations they're going to go through. That's one of the, rough things in this aircraft is they can go and pull everything you were looking at. They can go and pull all the voice recordings. They can go and check out every instrument input that you had in that aircraft. If you gave, a 0.1% of rudder, they can go and see all that information. If you turn the stick when you weren't supposed to, they'll know. So trying to lie in that is not going to help for sure.
Thank you,
So,
sir.
yeah. Again, all comes down to how did you react, and a scenario could be bad, could be good, but if you rely on your training and what you were taught, you'll be just fine.
Awesome. Well, this is going to be part B to that question is, have you yourself ever crashed an aircraft, or have you ever come across sticky situations?
Thank goodness I have not crashed at all. I would say so far, again, because I'm still new. You guys will learn when you go through the pipeline. Being a first lieutenant, is up there. Is not a second lieutenant. You have a little bit more rank, but you're still very new. So your experience level is very low. They consider you experienced when you have 500 hours. Nowhere even near that yet. So in the situations I've had, the hairiest one was while I was actually at Holloman. I was flying around and there was a zone where we weren't permitted to fly in. And the mission that I was tasked with, the target was actually within those boundaries that I wasn't allowed to fly in. So I got to fly outside of these boundaries, looking at something inside those boundaries. And I got to account for wind. I got to account for turn radius, all that stuff. Well, I accounted for wind, but I didn't realize that wind had picked up and wind had shifted in that situation. So I went to go turn, and I was actually turning towards the area I wasn't supposed to fly. But if you can turn and you can accomplish that 360 or 180 without actually hitting your boundary, you're completely fine. I began to turn, and I was looking at all my instruments, and I realized, oh, wow, that wind is a lot higher than I thought it was. That's going to push me right into this zone that we're not supposed to fly in. So I didn't have enough experience, but my instructor had told me if I actually continued that turn, I probably would have made it just by the skin of my teeth. But I, still being new, decided, you know what, I'm going to level out and quickly bank the other way. In leveling out and banking the other way, I actually drove towards that boundary, began turning, and I realized, oh shoot, I'm still going to hit this boundary. So I decided to put in a little bit more rudder to make my turn just a little bit tighter. And as I did so, I started to lose a lot of lift under the aircraft, and I actually started descending. Now, it sounds scary, but when you're at Holloman, all your aircraft are separated by roughly 500 feet. Now, I mean, that for a man pilot, you can deal with that because you can look out and you can see where everybody is, keep track of them. In an aircraft where you only have your sensor ball and you can't see anything, 500 feet is not a lot. So I actually lost about 500 feet of altitude. Luckily that day, because of weather and stuff of that sort, they decided to separate everybody by 1,000 feet. So I got saved. That was the hairiest. So I almost went into an area I wasn't supposed to. I almost stalled the aircraft in my turn and lost 500 feet. But again, kind of hitting off what I touched on earlier, I remembered my checklists. I remembered how the aircraft worked. I was able to respond correctly, got back to my altitude, climbed back up to where I was supposed to be, and the day was fine. The instructor at the end actually asked, like, you know what, that was a little hairy. Do you want to do this flight over again? And I go, no, sir, I'm done. I'm good. So he let me pass, luckily. That was almost a hook, but that was the closest so far. But in a couple of years of flying, I'm sure I'll have other stories that if I come back to the detachment to talk to everybody in person, I'll have more stories for sure.
All right. Thank you for that insight, sir.
Yeah.
So I know we're talking about stories. While we're on the topic, what are your actual experiences? I know we've been talking very theoretically so far, but I'd like to touch on your personal experience in the seat. If there are any stories to take home, if you're able to talk about it, the missions that you have been a part of or hope to be a part of, and in a narrative, if you will.
Yeah. So most of the flying so far has obviously been through training, and that's why I was hoping to talk more today. Is more on the training pipeline, and we've done a lot of that. I haven't gotten too much yet in the actual mission side. I was supposed to have been done with MQT here already, actually doing missions, but when I got here, they decided to do a reconstitution and basically just stop all ops and pick up on some training. So experience in the sea overseas is not really built up too much yet, but in the briefings that we've had and the stuff we talk about, again, why I absolutely love this aircraft is, I can't say where, but I will say when I got here, our squadron was flying in one sector of the world. Within a month, and talking to the people in the meetings, we've completely changed where we're going to be probably flying when everything starts back up. I go, wow, we're not even there, and we can just up and pick those birds and go fly somewhere else. Adaptability, being able to adapt is the biggest thing you'll have in this career field. Being able to change and adapt, it will save you in all of it. Because if you don't prepare to adapt and you're not ready to adapt, then when you go to a different mission set and a different AOR, you're going to be completely lost and have no idea what's going on.
So sort of orienting towards the future of the Air Force, can you briefly talk about two major drones, the MQ-25, also known as the refueling drone, and then the Loyal Wingman drone?
So anybody who starts the training pipeline will start to realize real quick what you can and can't talk about. Even if you find it on the internet and the World Wide Web, you take a note that hey, I can't talk too much about it. What I can say, since 2001, when we started really using the MQ-1, and then we transitioned over to the MQ-9, leadership really started really quick noticing, wow, this aircraft is capable of a lot of stuff. It has a very long loiter time. It's able to take munitions and deliver them with complete accuracy. Let's keep using it. As they started to employ this more and more, they started going, wow, where else can we go? And in aspects of aircraft you mentioned, in aircraft that I've heard about in briefs, there are a lot of different aircraft that we should be having within next 10, 15 years. And that was one of the reasons why I came into the MQ-9, the 18X career field, was because when I was looking at fighter pilots and heavy pilots, I go, what new aircraft are going to be coming out anytime soon? I'm sitting there going, maybe one, maybe two. And when you just generally Google future, MQ-9 aircraft and stuff, you get like a list of, hey, here's all these possible aircraft that we can do. Because it's a career field that is not really built upon yet, that allows so much room for expansion. So things such as refuelers, things such as taking manned aircraft and making them automated are completely within the scope of possibility, 100%.
Thank you, sir. And also we want to go through what are the main difference between an MQ-1 and MQ-9 mission differences.
So we don't really use the MQ-1 as much anymore. They made the MQ-1, then put weapons on it, and then realized, well, why don't we just make a whole other aircraft that fixes everything that the MQ-1 had, and then just go on from there. And that's exactly what they did. They're almost, I'm going to say, quote unquote, identical. They both serve the same purpose. They're both a remotely piloted aircraft, but within the changes, they upgraded systems. They allow for just different capabilities. And that's the whole reason they went through it. So the MQ-9 is kind of like the big brother to the MQ-1, just a more advanced, prettier version. of its younger sibling.
Yes, sir. And also, I have seen some RPA pilots have the opportunity to choose if they want to basically drop bombs or not. Is that true?
Yeah. So, like I said, so I went for the MQ-9, and there is the opportunity to go fly the Global Hawk. If you're just like, hey, I don't want to kill, and I'm not really a fan of flying, but I still want to be a pilot, be rated. I mean, there's the Global Hawk. You're essentially flying how an MQ-9 flies, but you don't have to drop bombs. Only reason why I didn't go with that realm is because you don't do as much hands-on flying. Since it's an aircraft that's just meant to kind of stare and just collect information, it's not really needed to fly with a joystick or rudders. So a lot of its flying just comes like pre-programmed on a computer, which I personally wasn't a fan of. But it's for someone out there. If they are really interested in drones, don't want to drop bombs, go fly, the Global Hawk. You'll probably get California at some point as your duty station. So I can't say that it's a negative for sure.
So we know you touched on this earlier. We sort of got side topicked, but continuing back onto it and nearing the end of the episode. So I know you talked about this earlier and we sort of side topicked it, but so going back into the future, where do you see the RPA AFC sort of directed to within the near future?
So we will always need manned aircraft. With that though, with the future, we're also always going to need RPA pilots. With RPA pilots, you lose an aircraft, you save the pilot. Although we don't have the ability or we don't have the capabilities that a manned aircraft does. F-16, F-22, we cannot fly at the same speed. We cannot get in, get out, or get in, destroy something, get out. We don't have that ability. If we decided to make say like a fighter aircraft unmanned and just make the entire fleet unmanned, we'd probably do it for carriers, large aircraft where it's just, hey, you kind of fly in a straight line, take this cargo, drop it off here, take these troops, drop it off there. We could probably do that, but fighters, we could try. The problem is if we have an unmanned fighter in a specific section of the world, we would have to have the launch and recovery crew, and we'd have to have the crew themselves located extremely close. The reason why is I kind of talked on it before, and for whoever doesn't know, because we are several thousand miles away from cockpit and aircraft, every input I make on the aircraft has at least a 3-second delay. So if I want to bank left and I pull my joystick to the left just a little bit and I let it sit there, it's 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and boom, it's finally banked. You try flying an aircraft going Mach whatever with munitions and fly with that delay is just not going to happen. So to say that we're going to go unmanned everything, I'd say no. We're always going to need manned pilots, but we're 100% going to keep experimenting, going, hey, can we do it? Because if we can use, say, some fighter aircraft unmanned and just take it in to just completely take out a target without losing a pilot, I'm sure we would probably use it 100%.
Yes, sir. And also transition more in the end of the podcast. We always ask this question as a signature question of the podcast. Since ROTC is a leadership course, we want to ask you what leadership means to you, sir.
Leadership is basically doing something whether you want to or not. That's kind of, a tricky way of thinking about it, but you pin on a rank and you wrote a blank check, so to speak. You said, hey, I'm willing to give anything up to and including my life. With that leadership, I remember it from Civil Air Patrol, and it's always stuck with me. The art of, I'm trying to remember. the art of influencing and directing people in a way that will win their obedience, loyalty, and respect in achieving a common objective. I probably butchered it in some way, but basically, can you do your job and be a respectable enough person to, when you're tasked with something you don't want to do, you really don't want to do it, that you take and go, you know what, I'm giving this, I'm going to kill it with everything I got. And people will follow you. You can walk in a room and say, hey, I have this rank, you have to follow me. You can do that, you just won't get very far. But if you go, hey, you know what, let's get the job done, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to get dirty with you guys. To put it in perspective, leadership, last week were preparing for the group commander to come by through our squadron. As a first lieutenant, I am out in front of the squadron building with the other enlisted sensors in my flight suit, pulling weeds in the middle of the day. You would think, oh, as a leader, you have the ability to say, go out there, you guys pull the weeds. I have more important officer-y stuff to do. You roll up your sleeves and you get dirty with them, and they look up and go, hey, he doesn't think that he's all that. He's willing to come in and do the dirty job, whether he's called to do it or not. That's someone I could follow, even if it's as simple enough as pulling weeds.
All right, thank you, sir. So I know we went through this a little earlier. We might have cut it out, but I think it's important. So let's just throw it quickly into the podcast, and we'll
For sure.
We'll continue. So we talked about the eye problems. So if you have correctable vision, what's kind of the process? If we could just quickly touch on that.
Yeah. I got lucky. I didn't have any vision problems, but a lot of people that go RPA go this route because their vision isn't the best. But with glasses or with LASIK, I don't know how with LASIK it would the process would be. But if your vision is correctable to 20/20, yeah, you can go fly. Go for it. A lot of people go, oh, I have bad vision. I can't go be a pilot. Yeah, you can. Half the people I work with, wear contacts or glasses because correctable to 20/20, so they can go fly the MQ-9. It sounds stupid, but you're staring at a screen. You're not, in a cockpit pulling G's where that could possibly affect your vision. You're sitting there going, yeah, I got my captain's chair. I can do this. So yeah, if your vision is correctable to 20/20, definitely push. And someone says you can't go fly, push until they turn you away. Because yeah, you can definitely fly.
Awesome, sir. That actually was a great news for a lot of people that you just said.
Yeah.
So we have reached the end of the podcast. Just one final question. Do you have any closing remarks for any of the listeners out there?
Well, as you guys have heard through the podcast, for everybody else out there, I was in ROTC for a long time. I was in school for a long time, worked for a long time. I mean, from 2011 to 2018, 7 years, and then another 2 years to then do some more additional training. It's a lot. And you go, wow, I'm so glad I'm not that guy. I got my stuff together. I'm a sophomore, I'm a senior. I'm good. That is awesome. For those of you who, maybe, messed up in school, got behind or whatever, just keep pushing until someone turns you away and says, no, there's no other options for you. Because I guarantee if you keep pushing and you keep asking and you keep trying with all your drive and with all your ambition, you will find a way to get it done. If you really want it, you'll have an opportunity somewhere if you just look for it.
Amazing words, sir. Thank you for that.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been awesome.
Yeah, no problem. So this has been live with DET 075. Thank you to all the listeners tuning in. Again, I'm one of your hosts, Cadet 3rd Class Junior Gihama, as always, accompanied by the PA team, Cadet Major Rojas and Cadet 3rd Class Kinghorn. And thank you to our guest co-host, Cadet 3rd Class Daniel Black. And a very special thanks to our guest, First Lieutenant Corbin White. Thank you again for being on the show, sir.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, First Lieutenant White.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Thank you, sir.